Alors, bonsoir tout le monde.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of strategies and public policies. Public presentations will be made tonight. Where's my agenda? Let's see. There. The first presentation tonight has to do with participative budget. Mr. Richard has the floor. Good evening, sir. Good evening. Tonight, I am here to inform you of the steps that have been made and the steps that are left following the last meeting dealing with participative budget in 2015. As it was said on the 27th at night, we met with the community and several meetings were held with different community groups, different residents of Dieppe. I can tell you that until now the answer is very positive, and several of these concepts have applauded the elected members yourself to go forward with such an opening. But many groups have said they were interested in getting involved at different level. So we are pursuing that, and we have also given you in your package a list of the different groups that we have met, and this is for information purposes. As for the next steps between now and the end of March, certain things are being prepared. We are finalizing an agreement with the consultant, and we also want to establish the parameters for the steering committee and have a first meeting of the steering committee. That meeting, the mandate will be to propose a manual of regulations, what kind of projects will be accepted, so on and so forth. What we'd like to do also is that they could come to the municipal council as to the budget that should be established. I know on October 27th last we talked about it. That's one thing that we wish the committee would do. And finally, what we'll have to do, as it was indicated, is to identify an amount of money, commit ourselves to that amount of money for 2016 before everything is undertaken. As for the agreement of service, it's an agreement with the consultant, the PBB, which is called Participatory Budgeting Project from New York. They are heading the groups everywhere in the States and at the international level. The team will be comprised of John Lerner, Executive Director, and other members of his team. Essentially, their mandate will be the training of our volunteer, the training of certain members of the staff, but to help us to offer technical support, and also with all the tools that have been developed. We have access to all these tools that have been used everywhere else in the States. So I come back to the steering committee. Essentially, certain questions they will have to debate. We've talked about the kind of projects that would be acceptable for such an undertaking. Certain municipalities accept only projects of property, and others projects that deal with services. That's the kind of discussions. There are pros and cons for both. So this is the discussion we would like to have with the steering committee to be able to make recommendations to the municipal councils. The kind of discussions is to who is allowed to vote. We've said it before. In many participatory budget, in the process, the citizens can vote. So up to 14, 16 years, or if you're an immigrant in several of these processes, it is open. If you live in the municipality, if you contribute to the municipality, you're allowed to vote. That is something the council has to decide. We have an example of what it may look like, but we would like to validate that step with the members of the committee because they know what is happening on location with their members. So we'd like to validate what we have put forward. It goes from January to December with the vote that will be made in the fall. And finally, as I said, the budget is an issue to be discussed. For the main committee, we have people who have shown some interest. Others were recruited. So what they recommend would be PB is to have 20 persons. It's quite a large group, but we say if we can have between 10 and 20 persons on that committee, it the important is that it be representative of the community, as many men as women. That's what we aim to do. And as I mentioned, the first meeting will be held probably. I had a conference call with the BBP on Friday, so we target the first week of February for that meeting. As for the public undertaking, the second phase, submission of ideas, this will probably be happen in April. Essentially, at that time, we'll have an idea of the projects that will be acceptable, what they will have accepted through different means. We will get the ideas from people. We will not limit ourselves to face. We'll use different mediums and different promotional tools. We've already discussed with our communication people to have a logo, a theme that would be proper to Dieppe, and this is what several municipalities do. So this is what I wanted to present to you. It's an up-to-date to tell you where we're at. I'm going to leave here to meet another community group. So we are going ahead, and I'm open to questions or comments if you have any questions, Mrs. Della. Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to see that the undertaking is going on. It has to do with the steering committee. How many meetings do you foresee with the steering committee to do its work? It's a good question. I was not sure what it would look like, and our people from BBB told me last Friday that it's approximately one meeting per month between January and December. They would be there for the whole time. Of course, they ask these members to do a few other tasks. They want them to get involved in one events, whether it's public gathering or whatever it may be, but that will be discussed at the first meeting. This brings my next questions. As for the first meeting, I imagine that we aim people from different age group, and I know that the first week of February or March, the 1st of February, we want to get away from the March break. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Dalla. Any further questions from the members of council? No. Thank you. The process goes on. Thank you, Mr. Richard. Next presentation. The Committee on Equal Opportunities between Men and Women. A recommendation, suggestion, resolution that came forward from the committee. Mrs. Dalla. Thank you, Your Worship. I can make the presentation, but I can leave it to the president of the committee the pleasure of explaining the situation because I'm not president anymore. Monsieur Thibodeau, sorry. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for the mistake. Mrs. Dalla was a member of the committee. She was chair when this decision was made. I concluded that was the reason why she was making the presentation.
No, some.
I don't mind presenting it, or you present it. Mr. Thibodeau, please stop throwing the ball. The committee adopted a resolution, the follow-up of the resolution adopted in November 2010 to evaluate the pay equity of all its staff. That study was done, It is proposed by Mrs. Dallaire, seconded by Andrew Bichot, that the result of the Pay Equity Committee be presented to the Municipal Council and make public so that the City of Dieppe can complete its process of pay equity. It's a suggestion, it's a request. Mr. Melanson, what is plan? We will bring this issue to the Municipal Council. The report was completed November and December. There's no meeting of this committee, so we bring you the file. The report was received at City Hall. I believe it was at the beginning of the fall. It's during the year 2014. It was received, and I'll just ask a question. Is it your plan that the reorganization will have an impact? That's a factor that we had to look at in the fall. That's why we have to discuss with the council. Since 2010, the few steps and few challenges presented themselves. The staff at the provincial level changed, so it's bringing us to 2015, but we're bringing you the file at one of the next meeting. February, March, April. It should be in February, but at least before the first meeting of March. Any more questions? Any more comments? No? Okay. When this is discussed, it will be presented to the council. We will invite the members of the committee to come be present for the presentation. Presentation on the fiscal impact analysis of residential reserve lands for the city of Moncton. Maybe my translation was not the best. We welcome Mr. Ray Isiembre. Thank you.
And members of council, thank you very much for having me here this evening. I'm going to be presenting the financial analysis, fiscal analysis that we did of the residential reserve lands. And to provide a context for the presentation tonight, the fiscal impact analysis is a part of the municipal plan review process. And also the intent is to make the city of Dieppe financially stronger. And by doing that by increasing net revenues and avoiding risk. So why are we doing fiscal impact analysis, and what is it? So the purpose is to estimate the financial impact or implications of land development on the city's costs and revenues. So I'm going to give you an example of what fiscal impact is and why it's used. And it's used primarily to deal with a gap in the decision-making process. And when we think about, there's a flaw in the decision-making process, and we think about when a proponent proposes a change in land use, that change in land use can either be implemented or initiated by a land developer or the municipality. In this case, it's the municipality. It goes through a review process. It gets sent to different departments. It gets sent to external agencies. There's public consultation. And eventually a report finds its way down to before council.
I would say up to council.
Up to council, sorry. Up to council. But typically in the review process, the finance department does not get involved. So the report appears before council without a financial report to indicate what the implications are of the proposed change in land use. And when you approve a change in land use, when council approves a change in land use, that's when you're making the commitment in perpetuity to support the cost of delivering services and the infrastructure to that development in perpetuity, and also collect whatever revenues you're going to collect from those land uses. So again, typically when that information, the land use information is presented to council, there's no financial information to accompany that. So that's what this report does, right? It bridges the gap between land use and the fiscal outcomes. So I'm going to give you an example of how this is done, and this happens right across Canada. So this is an example of a typical suburban community. It happens to be in my city of Ottawa. About 12 years ago, the 11 municipalities amalgamated, and we're now all one city. But before amalgamation, what I'm going to show you is this project was in the former city of Nepean, at the south end of the city. So the city of Nepean embarked on a planning process for an 800-acre business park. And this business park was intended to generate the revenues that were going to drive the South Urban community and support the South Urban community. So they hired a consultant, spent $150,000, spent a year and a half going through the consultation process, working with the land developers and the public, and then council adopted the plan, the master plan for this 800 acres. And after the plan was approved, they hired us to do the fiscal impact analysis. And the conclusion was that if this business park was built the way that it was designed and approved by council, it would yield $2 million net gain over 10 years, which means that after they've paid for all the service delivery, collected all the revenues, there would be a net gain of $2 million over 10 years, or $200,000 a year. The municipality did not have a specific number in mind, but the $2 million, oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. The $2 million was disappointing on 850 acres over 10 years. So they asked us to, concurrent with that, at the same time, there was a planning exercise going on in a residential area, about 1,000 acres. Again, spent a year and a half going through the process. And then council approved the master plan, and then we did the analysis after the fact, and the conclusion was that if the plan was built the way that it was designed, if the community was built the way that it was designed, it would be a shortfall of $50 million over 10 years, or $5 million a year net loss. So again, you pay for all the services for this 1,000-acre community over a 10-year period, and collect all the revenues, and you'd be short $5 million a year. So that's the consequence of not doing fiscal analysis at the same time you're doing your planning, right? You simply don't know what the outcome is. So what we did on the business park was we looked at, we discovered the problem. And it was the designers had set the floor area ratio, or the relationship between the building and the lot area, too low. They recommended 20% site coverage, which means that on a parcel of land, 20% of the site was the building footprint, and 80% was landscaping and open space. And you don't collect any revenue, tax revenue, from the open space. You only collect it on the 20%. So we looked at the business parks that were built out in the city, and we discovered that they were actually built out at 60 to 80%. So we changed one value in the model, and it produced a potential net gain of 60 to 80 million. So it was important for the city to know that, because they just hired their first economic development officer, and the economic development officer had to go out and target uses that could produce 60 to 80% site coverage, right? Since then, this happened 14 years ago, and what's happened since then is that technology companies have acquired most of the land in this business park, and the technology companies have the ability to achieve 60 to 80% site coverage. On the residential project, we did make some recommendations, and there were some changes made there, but we still ended up with a shortfall of $20 million. So when the land developers came in with their plans of subdivision, they were different than the original concept that was approved. But the administration and council did not resist the developers changed, the plans that were changed. They did not resist that because they understood the financial consequence of going with the first concept plan. So again, an illustration of why it's important to do the financial analysis concurrent with your planning process. So between the two, initially they would have been a shortfall of about 4.8 million annually, but with the change in the density for the business park and the change in the residential side, now the potential is to achieve 6 million net gain. Another reason to do the fiscal impact analysis is to avoid risk and what I refer to as the slippery slope. We start out, and so the example here is we start out with a municipality that's in balance and a municipality that's stable. And by that, I mean a municipality that's increasing property taxes at a regular rate. They're putting money away in reserves. They're able to provide service delivery at acceptable levels, the public satisfied with the level of service. Stable council, not major turnover on councils at election time, and stable administration. That's the ideal scenario. But what happens and what starts the municipality down a slippery slope is a reluctance to increase taxes and user fees, even though there's an increased demand on services. The next thing that happens is, there we go, a reduction in reserves. So in order to keep property taxes low and user fees low, the municipality will use the reserve funds to achieve that. Then they increase borrowing until they reach their borrowing limit. And then, I get a little pointer going here, and then you reach a municipal crisis of some kind. A municipal crisis can be initiated externally by an external source, or it can be something that's generated internally. And then the municipality has no choice at that point but to increase property taxes significantly and user fees, right? And an example of this is, again, going back to my region, my city, is that prior to amalgamation, there was a municipality called the City of Gloucester. They did not increase property taxes for 5 years. Zero tax increase for 5 years. They had among the lowest property taxes in the region. They also had among the lowest development charges in the region. And eventually the Department of Environment informed them that they had to upgrade their wastewater treatment facility and at a significant cost. But the municipality had run out of options. They had used the reserves. They had reached a borrowing limit. So they had no choice but to increase property taxes 25% the following year. The year after that, we had an election, and all of council changed and half of the administration. Famous story and infamous story. I see you're nodding your head. Maybe you've heard the story. But this pattern is very predictable, right? And so that's why we want to do fiscal impact analysis, is to stay away from municipal crisis, and we want to avoid risk. That's why we're doing this. So for example, in the province of Alberta, they have about 220 municipalities. About 63 municipalities in the province of Alberta are at the bottom of this slope here. In the past 12 months in Nova Scotia, the province of Nova Scotia, 4 municipalities have voted to dissolve, right? And one municipality, I have clients in Nova Scotia, one municipality, I heard council took the vote to dissolve and they just walked out and that's it, they never came back. They just give up, right? So Unfortunately, it happens, right? But, so we want to avoid those situations. Matter of fact, we want to increase the net revenues for the municipality. That's really the goal, right? We want to avoid risk, but we also want to increase net revenues. So to put this in the context of the city of Dieppe, the big picture is that according to the R.V. Anderson report that was provided to me, to replace your existing assets is estimated to be $400 million. Your current backlog, well, in 2009, your backlog was $36 million. And the $36 million represents infrastructure that should have been replaced but is not replaced. It's deferred maintenance, deferred replacement. Eventually, you have to do that. And then the challenge for the city, along with every other municipality, is that you have to look after your existing assets, and as you're building, you're acquiring more assets. So that just, the number just continues to grow. So based on our estimates, the residential land reserve that you have, when that's developed 1 year after build out, is going to add another $48 million. So this is not a static issue, it's fluid, and you have to keep on top of it. If you don't, it's just going to get worse. I'll give you some examples of, to kind of put this in context. The city of Peace River, Alberta, population, it's about 7,000. Their infrastructure deficit's at 120 million, population 6,000 people. Brandon, Manitoba has a revenue shortfall, annual revenue shortfall of 32 million. The city of Winnipeg's infrastructure deficit is 7.9 billion, right? So this is an issue for all municipalities across the country. The trend is to try and develop a strategy on how to deal with this before it gets completely out of hand. All right, there are some municipalities that you just, we don't know how they're going to recover from it, but there are other municipalities who are developing asset management strategies in order to deal with this issue. So the analysis that was done, the way we did it was
La façon dont on l'a fait,
the 980 hectares of land, along with the help from the planning department. And so we projected future land uses and future requirements for infrastructure, right down to the street lights and sidewalks and sewers and traffic signals and everything. And the interesting thing that came out of that evaluation was that if you take the total land area, the revenue generating lands, which are your residential and retail lands, represent 60% of the total land area within the reserve area. But then there's 40%, which is institutional, open space, environment, and a road network that don't generate any revenue. Then we looked at costs. We included all of the administrative costs for all your staff and all your departments. The cost of the fire department to support the reserve lands, library services, new trunk sewers, roads, sidewalks. Parks and Recreation came up with some estimates for the recreation facilities that need to be built there. Police protection, streetlights, utilities, and traffic signals. So for each of those, we did life cycle costing, long-term projections of what the cost would be. And life cycle costing includes the municipality's share of the capital cost, the replacement cost, because eventually you have to replace these assets, and then the annual maintenance costs associated with each of these categories. So that was included in the analysis that we did. What is not included were other municipal buildings, other assets that the city owns in terms of buildings, public works yards and facilities, municipal vehicles and equipment. Because all of those also need, a portion of those also have to go to support the reserve lands. And the reserve lands are basically going to double the population, so it's going to have an impact on all these departments and all these assets that you have. These were not included because we had a limited budget, and we did not include them. You have the information, by the way, it just wasn't included. On the revenue side, we included all the revenues from all sources. estimated provincial future funding, other revenues, property taxes, and sale of services. We got this information from your finance department, and we used the values and projected them forward onto the reserve lands. So all the revenues are included based on your future land use, but not all the costs. So in summary, we end up with, we did a 1-year, 15 and 13, 30-year projection. So the 1 year shows a negative number because at the front end, you're going to have to include a lot of cities' capital dollars to build the infrastructure. And then over time, you're going to be starting to collect revenues from the other land uses. So we are estimating that at 15 years, it's going to be 1.8 million net gain, 18.4 million net gain, and at 30 years, it's going to be 21.4 million. But that's not the final number, because we need to add the costs that were not included. When we add the costs that were not included, it's going to reduce the number, certainly, and it may eliminate the net gain at all. So the net gain that we have there of 18 and 21 might disappear. We don't know what the bottom line number is yet. So, in summary, the positive net gain does not mean the city has this surplus revenue. It means that the study that we did had limited budget, and not all the data was available or included. And one of the things that we discovered going through the process was that you have shared service policy, like number that I haven't seen in many municipalities that we work with. This is an exception, and what you're doing is a very good thing. That's what I want to point out. When it comes to your services, you have 15 services that the municipality offers, and of the 15, only 3, water, snow removal, and emergency planning, are 100% supported by the city of Dieppe. The others are all cost shared. So you have 12 services that you cost share, and that's an extremely good thing for you to continue doing. Your library services, what you pay for your library service is absolutely, it's almost zero in comparison with other municipalities. You have extremely good agreement there, and that's a very good deal for the municipality. So these shared agreements, continue on with those, and if you can find any way to produce more, by all means do so. That's a very good direction for you to pursue, continue pursuing. We recommend that you finish the fiscal analysis to make sure that we know where you're going with the residential reserve lands. Identify the optimum land use mix within the residential reserves. Identify financially supporting community. There's an aspect, there's an aspect to this that we haven't dealt with, but I want to underline it. It wasn't part of our mandate, but I want to underline that the non-residential lands, developing your industrial lands, your non-residential lands, the more you do of that, the more revenue you generate from those land uses, it's going to reduce the pressure on residential property tax, right? Which is what everyone's trying to do. So the economic development efforts, developing your industrial lands, retail, et cetera, office buildings, all of those things are very good things to achieve and to pursue. I was asked to comment on trends in Canada, what's working and what's not working. More municipalities are implementing fiscal impact analysis and incorporating it into their decision-making process. Fiscal impact analysis has been done in the United States going back to the 1940s, 1950s. In Canada, it's relatively new, like in the last 10 years, the last 10 or 15 years. But more and more municipalities are doing it because they now see the benefit of doing it. Link land use decisions with fiscal outcomes. Another trend is intensification of land uses. Not only in residential areas, but your commercial areas also. Not every non-residential land use, not all land uses are the same. Some land uses are going to generate significantly higher revenues for you than others. And it's worthwhile understanding what those land uses are. Because you're in a competitive environment here, like a lot of municipalities, don't necessarily accept everything that's going to come knocking on your door. If you have limited land, limited dollars to invest in infrastructure, you want to get the best return that you can on your investment. And that means it might mean being selective about which land uses you accept in the city of Dieppe. The other trend is contiguous development, making sure that development happens in an orderly manner, that land development projects don't leapfrog out further, which always costs the municipality more money. So contiguous development is certainly a strong trend. Another trend is including the finance department in your planning process. Another one is regular investment in reserves and regular maintenance of your assets. There's a principle that in the asset management world is that if you do regular maintenance on your assets and spend a little bit of money every year, it's going to extend the life of those assets. It's also going to cost less in the long run. If you allow an asset to deteriorate, let's say, for example, a road, to deteriorate and you don't maintain it at acceptable levels, eventually there will be a failure. And it's going to cost many, many more times to get that road back up to an acceptable standard. So this principle applies to roads, sewers, buildings, all the assets that you own. If you can spend a little bit of money every year maintaining your assets in good condition, then you won't get into the failure mode, which is simply going to cost you many times more. The image that's on the screen is rather small, but that's a sinkhole. It's in a road, again, in Ottawa. That opened up 2 years ago. A gentleman is driving down a 4-lane divided road in the city, and he thought there was a black tarp on the road, or the road was wet, and he drove his car into the hole, right? And that hole was created by, underneath the road was a stormwater pipe. It was installed 75 years ago. There was insufficient maintenance on that pipe. It should have been replaced. So there was a failure. That gentleman, just about, I guess about last October, is now suing the city of Ottawa for $500,000. And the reason in his lawsuit is the city's failure to maintain their assets. So it becomes a public liability point of view as well. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention this evening, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you would have about my presentation tonight or my report.
Okay, thank you. On va débuter les questions avec...
So we're going to start questions with Madame Dallaire. Thank you, Your Worship.
Understand the process well is we're reviewing our municipal plan now. So we've retained your services in that process to do a financial analysis. So does that mean that your analysis pertains to what the proposed zoning of the lands that are available and what that would generate in terms of revenue? Is that what
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm not clear because how we would go from where we are now in terms of revenue over the period of time to possibly a deficit position, because most of the services seem to be included there. What are we anticipating that might not be there that we're not?
It's some of the assets that we didn't take into consideration. Some of the buildings, public works yards, the extra vehicles. You're going to need extra vehicles. You're doubling your population. Additional equipment. The impact that this additional population may have on the administration. This particular building, for example, I mean, if you double your population, your existing facility is going to be able to accommodate that population. That's what we need to investigate.
Okay, and My other question was, to arrive at these numbers, a certain amount of assumptions would have had to been made in terms of how the residential areas would be developed in terms of what types of projects would. Can you clarify what are the assumptions that were made to arrive at these numbers?
Yes. So we took the 900 hectares, 980 hectares, and we used the existing pattern in the city. So if you were just to continue developing the way you are at your current densities, and you fill in the area, and if you have the same percentage of retail development that you have now in the city, and you project that into the new area, that's how we did it on the land use side. When we looked at the costs, we used the actuals from your operating budget. So we didn't use budgeted numbers or projected numbers. How much did you actually spend last year on fire protection? How much did you actually spend on police and so on? And your staff salaries, we used the actual numbers to arrive at that. So we try to eliminate as many gray areas as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Conseiller Godet.
Thank you, Councillor Godet.
Monsieur Chambre,
Thank you, Mr. Essiambre. We're very happy, and I read your comments and I follow your discussions on a regular basis. So thank you for this contribution. Two things. Continuous development. I believe that in Dieppe we have a particular challenge, that is to want to develop two poles or two nucleuses together, downtown and high town or uptown. Did you take this into consideration? Was this mentioned to you over the study?
With this particular study, no, we did not look at the core, anything about the existing land use in the city relative to this this reserve area. If I may expand on this to make sure that I'm explaining the term contiguous correctly, and so that it's understood. By contiguous development, I mean development that progresses adjacent to each other. You're not going out like 3-4 kilometers past where the existing development is and starting something new out there, right? So it's contiguous development. That's what I mean by that. And contiguous development should be encouraged, and this leapfrogging out 3 kilometers out to start something new should be discouraged. That's going to cost you a lot of money.
and in my mind, that's what's has happened in Dieppe with the development of the Boulevard Dieppe and the Haute-Ville at the same time as we were trying to develop this whole central area of Place 1604.
Right.
Anyway, I think that would qualify for leapfrogging or leap jumping or whatever.
Yeah.
The other subject is the library. I'm not sure that you have the correct information on the library part. And maybe somebody can correct me, but we have to supply the, comment est-ce qu'on dit ça, les installations, the space.
Yes.
Ça nous coûte, c'est nous autres qui fournissons les choses. Il y a un coût à ça. That comes back to the city. The province provides the staff and the books, and the other part, that roughly $20,000, the city puts in for programming. So I'm not sure that was properly understood in your presentation.
I think if I can put it in context, I think that's what you just described is a very good model, right? That's better than a municipality that has a freestanding library somewhere, a new building out to somewhere, and they have to maintain and operate a completely different facility.
I agree, but
Yeah.
the locale is not free.
No, yes, I understand.
We have to pay for it. We have to supply the heat and lighting and whatever, and the shelving and all that sort of thing there. So I'm not sure that you included it in your estimate.
Yeah, I did not get down to that level of detail. My comment was more about the fact that you have the shared service in the building as compared with a freestanding library somewhere, which is going to cost.
No
millions.
argument about that.
Okay, that's
concept.
okay.
Yeah.
That was my point. Okay.
OK. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions des membres du Conseil?
So are there any other questions from members of council? It seems not, so
Somewhat clear for most everybody.
Good. I hope so.
So statistically, we'll give you an 85% pass. So.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'll take that home with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Obviously, it's another way to look at our upcoming municipal plan changes. And I'm not sure. I know Councillor Dallaire asked the question in form of does this take into consideration future plan or the existing municipal plan? And I'm not clear on that, since we have not seen the new municipal plan that is in the works. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure in this case that we got what the answer is. There's going to be a link, so it's going to be a moving. This presentation could change by the end of the new municipal plan, right? Okay.
Okay.
I hope I didn't confuse the. Yes, I guess I did. Councillor Gaudette.
Do I understand that your study or your way of looking at a project is how to make each square foot or square meter produce more, basically taxation revenues?
Or better use of.
That is part of the goal, yes.
And the other part would be?
Well, that's part of it. There are planning considerations. It's the municipal plan is not driven totally by dollars, right? There are other considerations. So, let's say, for example, on the residential side, you need to have a mix of residential land uses, right? And each land use type generates different revenues. So we don't want to fill the whole area with the highest, just because single family or whatever the land use is generates the highest revenue. We can't fill the whole thing with just single family for the point of creating revenues. We still need the land use mix. We still need a mix of residential. So the point is, what's the right mix? What's the right mix that's going to get you the highest net revenues that you can achieve? The same thing on the commercial side. Not all commercial land uses are the same. The assessed value for a big box store is different than the assessed value for a freestanding restaurant or a gas station, or an office building. They all have different values. So the goal is overall to get the highest revenues that we can get, but still get the proper land use mix that we need to satisfy the demands in the city.
So frontage for each lot would be an item that you would look at?
We generally look at the revenues per square foot of land area, but frontage is another way of assessing the difference also.
I'm bringing the point because we have quite a few dead ends or the cul-de-sac.
Yes.
And they're costly to maintain.
Yes.
And we have dozens here and dozens. So I'm just wondering if an item like that can't be, how should I say, made it less of an impact in the future.
Well, you can, but I can turn that around the other way. It depends on where the cul-de-sac is, right? Not all.
Sometimes there's no way out, yeah.
Yeah, well, also, but if you have a cul-de-sac and that cul-de-sac ends at an amenity, if it backs onto a golf course, it backs onto the river, it backs onto a view, right?
Oh, in that sense.
Now, all of a sudden, the homes on that cul-de-sac now have double the assessment of a house on another cul-de-sac, right? So it depends. So, and sometimes we actually deliberately we will create an environment like that just to have a higher assessment. If a cul-de-sac is desirable at that location, and if it's desirable, and if it's going to increase the assessment, then maybe it's worthwhile doing it. But in other locations, maybe not.
But these opportunities are less than most.
Yeah. Yes. That's part of the planning process. But when you start thinking like that, it changes the perspective. When you look at a plan of subdivision, it will change your perspective. When you start to introduce the dollar issue into it, it can sometimes produce a different outcome. You look at it differently.
So in your experience you said you had done studies after the planning fact. What is the, should I say, the most frequent or the most important factor that you have, in your experience, gathered that should have been different?
I think just the fact that it's done, just doing the study, it's almost, I don't know if it's, we do entire municipalities, we do subdivisions, we do resort communities, we do all kinds of analysis of different land uses, and I don't think there's any one formula. But I think, and I've been doing this for 20 some odd years, and if you want to see what I've discovered is I don't try and guess at the answer anymore. I used to look at a plan and I would think, oh, this is going to turn out this way or that way. And then I do the analysis and I find out I'm wrong, you know. So if there's anything I've discovered doing this over time is that don't try and anticipate the outcome. It's amazing how one plan might look similar to another, but when you do them, they have a different outcome. You can take a plan of subdivision, 100 acres in Dieppe, and you can take the same layout and you can put it in one part of Dieppe, you put it in another part of Dieppe, and you get two different outcomes.
Oh, that's right.
Okay? So that's what I've discovered over the years is I don't try and guess at the outcome. I've been proved myself wrong too many times, so I don't guess at the outcome anymore.
I guess it's kind of like trying to figure out unconditional grant formulas from the province.
Yeah, well,
Councillor Dallaire.
One last comment. I think this tool will be useful, and I think it's going to be a living document because as things become more concrete, we'll be able to reevaluate and assess based on that. I think what I'm looking forward to is hopefully when new projects come to council that element of cost evaluation will be part of the factor because we have been getting a lot more requests for development that are more leapfrog developments, and we've been evaluating developing charge areas, but in the meantime, we have to carry that. So I think this is very positive.
if I may, one last comment, Mayor Lapierre. This tool is equivalent to a land developer's pro forma, right? When a land developer puts a plan together on this piece of land, every time they change the lot mix or they change roads, they run the model every time. They can run it 30, 40 times. It only takes minutes, right? So this is intended to be the equivalent for the municipality. So every time your land use mix changes or roads or cul-de-sacs or whatever, you can run the model and see what the outcome is. That's the intent. So it is a living thing. It's moving all the time.
Thank you.
Okay. Nobody else? Personne d'autre? Alors, merci. Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
We will now move to the next item on the agenda, which
would be item 4, policies against public harassment. Martine Savoie.
Bonsoir.
Good evening. Good evening. As you can tell, the next two items are interrelated to the policies against harassment. The first one is to fight against public harassment. Second one, at work. Both are separated, but the issue is interrelated. We've presented these two policies last June at your request. We asked a legal advice, and we also consulted the union to see if they had any comments or recommendation to make. And essentially, both policies, I'll talk about the first one, remain unchanged. The legal advice that we received was very good. It said that everything was there, everything was fine. There's no changes to be made. One thing that we changed slightly to make it clearer, but essentially there was no change to be made. So I will make an overview, brief overview, since it's been a few months, and it's my first time with this equipment, so there. The objective for the city of Dieppe is to offer the residents, the visitors, installation facilities that would favor the growth of the individuals and families in a respectful and safe environment and healthy for the users and the staff. So the policy, we say that the city of Dieppe has a tolerance zero as to any form of verbal or physical violence, threat or aggressive behavior, harassment, bullying, or discrimination. Also in our guidelines, we've added some examples of kinds of harassment to help the people to see what they could consider harassment. We have many examples. In the policy, the rights that the cities reserve for themselves, there's three main ones. It reserves the right to expel and forbid access for a period of time according to the importance of the behavior, to report to the RCMP any incidents and undertake legal charges, and requires some reimbursement of costs associated to the lost, if any, if there are lost damages to the property. In the policy, it is well mentioned the responsibility of all the people involved, the municipal council. Its role is to adopt the policy that you are receiving. You have to respect, to support the staff, the decision of expulsion if need be. The Human Resources Service is to implement, revise the policy as we do for everything else. Anything that has to do with the staff, and to offer a support or an interpretation application of this new policy. For the other services, it's also to guarantee the respect, make some follow-up within 24 hours if a director makes a decision to expel someone from a facility, recreational. We have to make follow-up within 24 hours to make sure that the case is being looked after. The policy, the employees is to respect the policy, is their main concern, to ask essentially if there is something that they see in the facilities where they work, if they see worrisome incidents, they have to ask the person to stop the behavior or to leave. If need be, call 911 if it's a case of a physical violence or any other violence or something that is quite aggressive in nature, and to report to the supervisor what happened, to fill the incident report within 24 hours, to cooperate with the RCMP if need be. the users is to respect the policy, to respect others, and to cooperate with RCMP if need be. And the organization and association is to promote and support the municipal policy, to make sure that the people involved know and respect the policy, and also assist the RCMP. We put an administrative procedure to have the employees to understand if something should happen, what they should or should not do. So it's a one-page document that we will present to the employees to explain everything to them. Essentially, we come back on the guideline tolerance zero for verbal or physical violence. In the case of a refusal, they can be expelled. And in case of an expulsion or prohibition of access, they will receive a written decision within 24 hours, the role of the staff, because we will have information session and training for all the employees. So we've also put in the procedure the role of the staff to make them understand when they should react if they see something, and we clarify what is the definition of harassment, bullying, aggressive behavior, what step to take to really support them if something should happen. The same thing for the directors. They will be receiving a training session to know exactly what to do. So tonight it was to present to you this policy that we presented earlier this summer for your consideration, and we'll have to bring it to a public meeting. If you have any questions from Mrs. Dalla. Thank you, Your Worship. Our legal advice proved that a bylaw, that a policy was enough to give the authority to expel someone. Yes. I had questions as to the implementation. In public area, there will be signs to promote. Will we also train the community organization whose members use our facilities and give them a given time so that they can give the message to their members? I know that the communication service has worked on a communication plan. They're ready to implement it as soon as the policy is approved by the council. All that a part and parcel of the plan, but I don't have any details for you tonight. I only know that it's ready and waiting for the approval. The reason why I'm asking, let's say in the future we had an organization where several members would be problematic. I suppose the policy gives the authority to the city not to certify that organization. Not, well, the city can decide for reasons mentioned in the policy, refuse access. It can be several people, an association, or one person. It's really case by case. If there is a problem, I suppose that the director of a community service director would look at the situation to see what would be the appropriate thing to do, and if he should prohibit a whole association. That's why I thought it might be better to prevent. Once the staff is trained, if we can meet the organization to make them aware, to give them the training how to give their members the message, it could avoid some serious problems. The communication plan, I may not have seen the details, but I'm sure there are signs, plan, documents, and a lot of things to make sure that the association, the users, all these groups, and these persons will be aware previously of what to do. Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Nolan, thank you, Worship. We will make the presentation to the whole staff. Will it include the students and the non-unionized, all the employees, okay? How will we make sure, especially our younger employees who work in a given area, in a situation where there is not necessarily a supervisor, how will we show them, how will we train them properly, how to make a decision when there is not one supervisor present with them, especially during the hours when the risk is high? How can we make sure that these young persons will feel safe and within the authority to act? The training and information sessions will make sure that the employees all understood well. If the people have to work without senior supervisors in their sector, I'm sure there would be a contact person that would be designated where they can call and ask an advice. But the objective is to inform and train all the employees so that they feel at ease to recognize the incidents that could require from them an intervention. And if they're not at ease to intervene, that they should call someone. If it's quite critical, we'll tell them to call 911. We really have specific things for them to do or not to do. Health and safety, it's important that they manage the best they can, but without getting themselves in trouble. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Beliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. Same line of thought as Councillor Nolan. 540, we mentioned the question of putting in writing within 24 hours to a person who's involved. Is it a situation where an individual show a lack of respect at the end of the night at a tournament in one of our facilities, 8:30 at night? It goes beyond reason and the person is asked to leave. The 24 hours would mean that possibly the team will play the next morning at 8:30. Will the individual be told that he doesn't have access to the baseball field, the arena, or the aquatic center? Will the individual, do you think you are able to apply it that quickly since there's nothing in writing that has been prepared? Dealing with 24 hours. It will depend on the seriousness of the incidents. If it's serious enough, we will tell them to inform the person that they are told not to go back until we can evaluate the situation fully. Our facilities are open on weekends and at nights. It could be on the weekend. So really, we will train our staff. It's a question of judgment. It's a matter of judgment. If it's less serious or less critical, it could be kind of a warning. The person may come the next day, but if he does it again, we would have to analyze it again. If I understood correctly, you mentioned that there will be, Councillor Della mentioned that there will be sufficient signage in all our facilities mentioning that an unacceptable behavior will not be tolerated and it will be dealt with by the staff. The policy will also be on our website so the citizens and visitors can have access to it. Normally those people don't read website. The association will be aware, the employee will be aware, and visitors come as a group, so someone will be aware, because we'll make sure that all the organizations are well informed. Thank you. Councillor Della, thank you. A final comment, I forgot about it. 3B, point number 8. What? I'm sorry. She wants to add something, but I missed it. Thank you. Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Sabois, for the work that was done. I want to make sure of one detail. You talk about a harassment policy. It's a big baby. I've worked in an environment where we implemented the harassment policy. It was painful, as painful for the union as for management, and the explanation that was given to the employees before the employees could understand what is a harassment policy takes a lot of work. And I know here in the city, you will hire during the summer some young people who work 2 or 3 months, whether it's at the swimming pool or to mow the lawn or whatever it may be. These youngsters who will not dare talk because they were accused of something, because they're not full-time, because they're not protected by the union, they won't dare talk, but they do receive harassment from I want to make sure, in other words, that the policy will be explained to all the different level of our employees. Yes, whether an employee is unionized or not, students or not, it applies to everybody, and they will all have access to the training. We have orientation sessions for the students, so we will give them all the information that deals with their working environment. So it'll be part and parcel of their orientation session. As an employer, we have to protect everyone, no matter who they are, and no matter the nature of the employee with the job. Thank you. I think it's important to remind that we talk about the policy to counter harassment against the public. Councillor Leblanc. Thank you, Your Worship. In page 37, item 5 of the documentation, could you clarify somewhat what we need? The policy applies to all the staff of the city during working hours. That's the next one. No, it's the first one, or is there two? HR 4. That's a policy to counter the public. Sorry, I don't know. Our back.
On va finir avec un.
Keep your question for the next one. Thank you. Someone else? If not, thank you. I think it's really important that the association, because they're the ones who should accept some responsibility for their members, and I think that if some of them sign a contract with the city, it should be included in the contract that they sign, whether it's minor hockey or any other sports, and also the other cultural, social association, that it be included in their contract with the municipality. Similar to all agencies who receive financial support from us, all these groups will have to sign a contract with the municipality to make sure that they are well informed, and then it'll be their responsibility to inform the public or their stakeholder. Next item, policy to counter harassment at work. So, the history with the policy to counter harassment at work, The council adopted the first policy September 2005. It was amended in 2007. So we find ourselves, it was 2014, we're in 2015. Really, since 2005, there was evolution in the jurisprudence that forces us to review the policy. Supreme Court of Canada has recognized that the employer can be responsible for acts committed by their employees. People are aware of this. If we look at the media, you see what I mean. We have revised that policy, we studied it, and we added, trying to change it. So we wanted to clarify it, add some definition. We work a lot on the essence. We've added a lot of information. We also develop administrative procedure on how to deal with complaint. And in your package, you also have 3 appendix. We wanted to add tools to the policy. Beforehand, the policy existed, but the other documents had yet to be developed. So essentially, the objective of that policy is to guarantee a healthy working environment, to protect the integrity and the mutual respect of the dignity of people. We've added definition of abuse of power and harassment. We were talking about harassment previously, but not abuse of power. So essentially, can quickly talk to you. It's a kind of harassment. There's abuse of power when a person uses power or his authority with the implicit power that is involved to intervene negatively, hinder the work or the career of a person. The abuse of power, bullying, coercion, and so on and so forth. It also includes favoritism for a person against someone else. That didn't exist beforehand. And we also have added more details, the responsibilities of everyone. So the same one as the other policy, the municipal council is responsible to adopt the policy, and the management is responsible to make sure the policy is respected, so on and so forth. So each and every one has responsibility similar to the first one. They're very clearly defined in the document. So we have also added what didn't exist before. We developed administrative procedure to add to this policy to facilitate, to make sure that it is well understood by the employees. We have developed this a document with paragraph in the when you receive a complaint, we define the rights and responsibility of persons, including the victim, the witnesses, if need be, and the investigator. How to deal with a complaint. We've added, we could choose an informal approach or mediation at any given time. We can ask a mediation and go to it, which is, and we also describe formal approach. We have developed an investigation, a mandate. If we have to call on a person from outside to undertake an investigation, we establish a mandate to make it easier for them to undertake that exercise, the role of the investigator, and we will require that they deal with several aspects of our administrative procedure to so that we can have the proper information. We also talk about decisions, possible decisions for complaints that are proven, some that are not proven. We talk about the investigation report. we gave delays. So it's really document for the employees so they can see the steps, what to do, who to deal with, what to expect, what are the delays, who could be involved in the complaint if there is one. So it's in order to be clear for them and make it easier to deal with it. We have also developed steps where people can ask a review or appeal the decision of the employer, and there's also provisions in the Human Rights Act. We have also developed a complaint a form before an employee would file a complaint verbally or in writing. Sometimes it was in the form of a letter, an email. Now we have a form, an official form. We have to bring out some information that are quite important, so it will help them to follow the process and to make the task. So a guide to explain, and we develop a chart of the development complaint. It's a beautiful organization chart that will explain how things happen, similar to the policy to counter harassment in public. We'll also have training session information for the employees. We'll make sure that all the employees have access to the policy, whether it's through internet or in writing. It applies to all the employees, the students, the regular, the full-time, and it's really a policy that already existed before, but with important updated information. So that's what it is. Thank you. Question, Mr. Nolan. Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question when it comes to the investigator. From what I understood, will the investigator be a person that is not employed by the municipality from outside? It's possible. And we can expect that the investigator will have a training to manage and to do it well. Yes. It's written that an investigator must have experience in such an undertaking. What was done in Kodiak to deal with public complaint that would be minor in nature, would not be able to go to the RCMP. They hired 5 or 6 or 7 individuals. They're not full-time employees, and when a complaint is presented, these people are there, they're called upon, and they do the investigation. Maybe something to look at. I'm just suggesting this. Thank you. Councillor Leblanc. Thank you, Your Worship. Now I'm on the right page. Page 37 in our package. Same question. Policy applied to the staff outside working hours. I have other questions, but can you answer this one? I don't have the same package as you. Is there a paragraph number 5? Policy applied to all the staff during and outside working hours. There might be an activity outside working hours, such as Christmas dinner, barbecue, which is on lunch hour. Anything that happens, Christmas supper that is not during working hours, the policy will apply. Number 2, Your Worship. Item 4, dealing of a informal approach. We say the first step. What page? Page 40. It's in the administrative procedure. Informal approach. If someone is being harassed, do we feel that he will feel like facing the other person first before he complains. It's optional. If the employee is not at ease, they don't have to do it. It says step number 1, and then B, if no change is brought to the behavior, then she will tell responsible person. We wish the employee could tell the other person what is happening is not welcome. The behavior is not well received. It's one of the basic steps also for a complaint to be presented. If I understand, the person has to understand your behavior really is not welcome. That you rub my neck, or I mean, but I go directly to the point. But the employee has a right to know that their behavior is not well received or well wanted. If the employer is not at ease, somebody has to do it on his behalf. Number 1, the first person involved has to know about it. Maybe subtle, and for a person, that behavior would not bother them, while for other people it will bother them. So, and if obviously it's something that is a real delicate situation and the employee is not at ease, we can go directly to a formal approach. First thing is that the person has to know. I fully agree. It's just when we look at the steps, number 1, the person must talk to the other person. If that doesn't work, then it's the way it's written. If we follow the steps, well, the paragraph at the end, it says it's optional. Optional. And we will explain it. It depends on the situation. Of course, some people are not at ease with going to the person and say what you did. But if the person is not at ease with that, then it's optional, but it has a certain weight during the whole. It's when it's mentioned if you have a grievance, you have to follow the steps. I want to make sure that the steps, as mentioned here, that it's a process. Someone can't turn around and say, you did not come directly to me. And the approach says, number 1, you have to tell me you didn't tell me. So,
Councillor Beliveau. Thank you, Your Worship. We'd seen it on the first draft, so I want to congratulate Martin with what we see here tonight. Very well done. It's necessary for policies if we want to give the proper services. I still want to talk about a couple of items. Maybe you'll be able to correct me. Between the guide and the policy itself, the policy, I was able to understand that harassment could be the repetition of an act or of words, but it could also be maybe only one act or word, but of a more serious nature. In the guide, it's mentioned that more than one act or one event is necessary. So I'm wondering if it's consistent with the other one, because harassment in the guide, it's mentioned maybe more than one act or event, and then the policy, it says it doesn't necessarily have to be more than one. So in the guide at paragraph 2, we see harassment is normally defined as a series of incidents, but can be constituted of one serious incident if it doesn't have a durable effect on the individual. What page is that? 48. At the beginning of the guide, paragraph 2. And then the procedure at 2.1, it said, sorry, number 6 at page 47, harassment or not. Harassment signifies that more than one act or one event is necessary for there to be harassment, and if the one act or event is not considered as serious, and it's in bold letters. Yeah, well, we'll correct it so that it coincides with the other. Also, the corrective measures in founded complaints. Have you considered including disciplinary measures? Should you incorporate this within the policy that it could be associated with firing? We didn't want to establish, we didn't want to set up corrective measures in the policy as such, but we do have procedures in a guide that we use to judge the severity and to decide which corrective measure will be warranted. So legal advice told us that it would be preferable not to have the measures in the policies and procedures. It should be in something separate. Obviously, if there's a very serious act and the recommendation from the investigator is to fire the employee, then... So I raised the following point. The employee in question, would he or she know that there's a policy in the municipality that broaches the subject and the disciplinary measures, and that those could mean firing? Is the employee going to be aware of this policy? That's what I want to know. When we have information sessions, usually we tell them what could lead to corrective measures, fraud, theft, examples like that. And in the same sense, we're going to explain to the employees that if they find themselves in a situation where there's a complaint against them, well, what has happened will be validated. They'll know that we will tell them that there could be corrective measures that could even lead to firing. But will they be able to see it black on white written in a policy? No. Our legal advice tells us not to, tells us that what we are doing now is what should be done. It shouldn't be written out formally in a policy. If that's the legal advice that you got, then I don't want to question it, but I want to say that if it ever happens and the employee did not know, depending on the severity, did not know that it could lead to his being fired, there might be some events whereby the municipality will have to compensate this employee. There are policies that exist. Anyway, thanks for your comment. Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Nolan. Thank you, Your Worship. Last comment. Just wanted to make sure that when the presentation is made to the auxiliaries and to the students, that they know that they have access to possible complaints at Human Resources. And I'm not talking about all students, but the younger ones, 15, 16 years old, who are not necessarily going to feel comfortable in talking to their superiors or to other members of staff. I think that it's very important in the hiring process that this should clearly be identified, that if there's something they don't feel comfortable with something because they can't necessarily go see the union for protection. So it's just the department and the municipality that protects them. It's not just the union employees that this is aimed at. All staff, they'll all be invited to information sessions. Students will talk to them during their orientation. So everyone is protected by the same procedures at the same level with the same information as everybody is. Okay, but at the same time, we have to be aware and sensitive about the fact that we have students, our lifeguards, for example, and the tutors and things like that, that they have recourse. And, you know, if it's their first job, they won't necessarily be comfortable addressing older people and higher-ups. All employees will be aware of the policy, or will be made aware of the policy. Thank you, Mr. Beliveau. Thanks for your indulgence. Did I understand properly that the administration can go through an investigation without an official complaint? If it's something that's just observed, yes, our responsibility, if we observe something, even if there is no complaint, the person does not want to file a complaint, or a colleague, a manager observes something that is judged inappropriate, it's something that has to be addressed. Thank you. Thank you. If there are no other questions, thank you, Madame Savoie, for your 2 excellent presentations. The next item, we'll be talking about the arts and the municipality. Madame Cormier, good evening. Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. We found it important to give you an idea, or give you an overview of arts and municipalities. So we thought it would be a good idea because things are getting put together. We're getting confirmation for different things lately. So we're going to put the glasses on. The first thing, we'll give you our dates and the site of the conference at the Delta at the Arts Center. We'll talk about partnerships. We'll talk about tentative programming. Not too much detail there because contracts haven't been signed yet, but I can tell you that there are going to be beautiful arts workshops that are going to be presented. So dates, like I said, it's going to be from the 2nd of June, Tuesday, to Thursday, the 4th of June, at the Arts and Culture Center in Dieppe. There'll be workshops from Wednesday afternoon and the last day of the conference, because the last day of the conference, maybe a third of the people are gone because they have to drive home. So by noon, a lot of them have left. So doing it the arts and culture in the fire hall, and there's no problem doing it there. And then at the Delta, we'll have the plenary, which is the banquet, Wednesday night in Dieppe. So the plenaries in the morning. And we'll start at the Delta, but we'll end up at the Arts Center in Dieppe. So partnerships, we have the Acadian Association of Professional Artists in New-Brunswick with us. The whole programming, the artistic programming, I can tell you that there'll be 21 different artistic presentations. So that's one big, humongous thing to put together, but they do excellent work, and we have very great collaboration with them. So we're very happy with them, and we say thank you to them. The Arts and Culture Center in Dieppe, the locales, they're happy to have all these different new things at the Arts Center. We figured it was a great place because it's our old municipal hall, and it's arts for the city, so I think that's a good combination. We also have the Association of Arts in the municipality. It's the programming of the speakers, the workshops, and the hotel rooms at the Delta. They're the ones who reserved it. But we also have announced other hotels in Dieppe for the different overflow people. So Tuesday is programming. 2nd of June, the arrival of the conference participants. There'll be pre-conference activities, 2 choices. You'll be really happy. I won't give you the details. I can tell you right now that there'll be some kites involved. And then Stella Circus Stella also. And then there'll be different artists from Dieppe who will get involved. But we won't give you more details. In the afternoon, we have the registration, the welcome speech by Mayor Lapierre, and then the plenary in the afternoon. In the evening, there's the activity. As you know, it's the first, so we represent l'Acadie. We're happy to have them, but we're going to try to visit around the areas. So the first evening, there'll be an activity at the Pays de la Sagouine. That'll be paid by the participants with lobster dinner. I think that's going to be good. You're going to enjoy that. Wednesday morning, plenary at the Delta. Afternoons, it's the 4 workshops here at the Arts Center. Workshops, there are approximately 10 of them and then in the evening, there'll be the banquet. Very nice menu we have planned. We gave a good challenge to Chef Mueller to come up with something different for arts and culture, dessert, and then there'll be an activity after dinner with the participants in the conference. Thursday, the last day, we have plenary in the morning at the Arts Center. The closing dinner, like a buffet, and there'll be also a post-conference activity in the afternoon. We can't give you the details yet, but all this will be made public in March, registration forms, and you'll definitely see the programs and things like that. Our financial responsibilities at the City of Dieppe here. It's a grant from to the arts and the municipality. It was part of the application when we put in our became candidates. Partnership programming with the AAPNB, the professional artists. We're also responsible for the transport of shuttles between the Delta and the Arts Center. It's not that far. If it's nice weather, June, the trails will be clear. I mean, we stressed these nice trails. So we'll see if there's physical activity at the same time during the 3 days. We're responsible for the banquet, the 3 breaks during the conference, and the 2 lunches. Well, one of them, the last one, is going to be at the Arts Center. We're responsible for renting out the rooms at the Delta. But if we fill up all our rooms and the agreement with the municipality, then there'll be no charge, and there'll be little souvenirs in the bags for the participants. So we're working on negotiation with the artists in residence at the Arts Center to come up with something with the mud of the Petit Kodiak. So we're working with people from Alma in New-Brunswick to come up with things like that. So we want to involve our residents too. There could be a couple of other little details during the conference. There'll be the Éloise will be mentioned. That's going to take place in Dieppe. That's the award ceremony, Les Éloises. So representatives of l'Acadie. So that's why we want to do. We want to go a little bit elsewhere, and the programming will come out in the month of March. Questions, Madame Dallaire? Thank you. This is going to be very interesting, even if it's mysterious. My question was, as far as the financial projections, are we within the amounts that we had established for the year. Yes, the only challenge was maybe with sponsoring because, okay, not many people, not many organizations know arts in the municipality, but I think that we have a possibility of making a good sale here, selling the municipality and arts. Thank you, Councillor Godet. I thought I saw the other day that there were a couple of bottles in the shape of maple leaf with Petitcodiac mud inside that we had made when we went for an exchange in Parksville in BC. Will there be 300? No, there are not 300. Maybe 3. Seriously speaking. Post-conference activity, Thursday 4th. What could we expect? Maybe we're looking at maybe 3 activities around Hopewell Rocks, visit the trail for l'Étoile, maybe dinner or lunch at on a boat in Shediac. There are beaches. It's beginning of June, so maybe not, but we're looking into that. There's tournament also. People ask us if they could play at Falls Creek. Want to golf? Well, that would be essentially for the end of that day. It wouldn't be the following day. No, it would end around 2 o'clock that afternoon. Did I understand also that you wanted to maybe try to see if there could be some walking between the Delta and the Arts Center along the trail? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we could blaze the trail, or at least there's also the Odyssey Monument. That's also something that we're planning, but I can't tell you everything. Okay, just like the British would say, we could tell you, but we'd have to kill you afterwards. Mr. Beliveau, yes, did you determine or at least estimate maybe the number of delegates? Because figures vary, but you have an idea up to now? We're expecting 250, 300, if figure with the arts, 250. If we talk to the professional artists, they say everybody's going to be there. So we're going to get ready for 300. Municipalities representatives, do they have to be members of the organization, Arts and Culture? Arts and the municipality, I mean. I don't know if they have to be members, but if they're not members, they pay a premium. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think we're waiting for the forecast for record numbers for participation. That's what we're expecting. Yeah, and we're going to get it. People are talking. Good. Are there any other questions from members of council? If not, thank you very much. Continue your good work. And we can't wait to see the people from arts and the municipality again. Next presentation, item 7. On the policy L10, it's basically rental rates, the community artistic stays. The policy L10, as you know, dates back to 1998, needs to be studied, moved, amended, changed. So here's a little presentation. I'll talk to you about the description of the artistic stage, the objectives of the policy, restrictions on the rental of the stage, prices and other charges. It was built in '93, starting to get old. That's why you're going to see during the whole presentation that we'd like to talk about saving it, to do what is necessary to save it. It's a hydraulic system, quick installation, and it's 9.75 meters by 7.31 meters, and the stage is at a height of 5 meters, 17 feet 6 inches. the idea is to have a mobile artistic stage to and to be able to recoup most of the expenses. The restrictions, that's the big part of it, because as you say, we want to be able to keep it. You saw the size of it. We don't want it to go farther than 25 kilometers. We don't have requests too often, but we could. And if it's 17 years old, 22 years old, and we want to keep it, so that's a big part. That wasn't part of the old policy. So we want this to be adopted. We don't want it to go farther than 25 kilometers. That's Shediac, Moncton. Those are the requests I receive mostly anyway. The other part is, it's no equipment can be attached to the structures. No lights directly. They have to be on towers. That's something that's going to help us save it. The renter has to have 2 insurances. Previously it was 2 million. Now we're asking for 5 million, just like everybody else. And then we need another insurance for physical damages, fire, theft, vandalism. Value of replacement of 217,000. I think right now it sits at 96,000. And we checked with our insurance. We had it evaluated, and it's 217,000 now. That's one of the main reasons why we want to keep the stage, because it's expensive to replace one. Another thing, if the event is put back because of bad weather, then there'll have to be a new request. I mean, it will have to put in a new request. We can't say that we'll do it the following week, etc. So it could bring about problems. Tariffs, we checked around. We checked with the city of Moncton, with the people who are renting it. Stage Line, I think they have something like that. Halifax, it's all in the same amounts approximately for this size that we have. Is 3,500 for a day plus taxes, no transport, or 3,000 a day for 2 days. And we checked the prices, so obviously things are going to be changing. Right now we're at 3,500. $600 a day for community organizations in Dieppe, accredited. It includes the transport, but not the tax, and then the rental of the stage. Basically, the equipment. It's the tarp, the skirt, 2 stairs, set up and put apart the stage, and then there are other charges. There'll have to be an additional $500 for each setup and put it, because they change. I want it there. No, I want it there. No, I want it there. So okay, we tell them, okay, it's there. It's decided. 1 year, I had been there with Mr. Roach and Memram Cook. They wanted it in the hill behind the institute because they thought it was hydraulic. We could set it up this way, but no, it couldn't set it. So we have the last word. But if they want to set it up and move it and things like that, it'll be $500 extra. And now that's my little smiley face. Questions from members of council, Madame Daléa. Thank you, Worship. What is the lifespan? How long do we figure it's going to last? I haven't had it done. Employees have this. I don't have that because it has to be inspected on a yearly basis. So I would figure that its knowledge is forthcoming. We're talking about 25 years lifespan, so we're almost there. But it's still in very good state, very good condition. That's why we want to set up measures to make sure that we can keep it as long as possible. Very rigorous inspection to look at the structure and things like that. So it's almost the end, but maybe we can go another 10 years with local use. That brings me to my second question. We know that we'll have to replace it one day or another, but maybe it might be a good idea to set an amount aside on reserve for when the time comes to replace it, especially if it's just in 10 years. Maybe the amount is not so high because it's a shorter term. That's already done. We've almost have the total amount on reserve right now if we ever have to replace it. So, and every year we'll add to it. Any other questions? Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. Little question, maybe clarification on tariffs costs. You say $3,000 a day for 2 days. They have to be 2 consecutive days that has to be stated? Yes, it's 2 consecutive days. Okay, thank you. Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Alice. That clarifies one of my questions. I also notice in the $3,500 for a day, you have other charges, $500 for the setup and yeah, we set it up and then the head honcho comes and he says, no, this is not where we wanted. We have to break it down and then move it and set it up again. That's $500. At $3,500, you install it. You install it once. That's it. Okay, I understand. Thank you very much. Yeah, it had been a good purchase. No other questions? We go to the next presentation. Thank you, Madame Cormier. For our last, but not least, presentation, we received lately, just before Christmas, a beautiful gift. A letter from the Public Library Commission of Dieppe. So we thought it was a good idea to invite them to talk to us. Good evening.
Thank you, Your Worship, Madam Councillors, gentlemen. Tonight I will talk on behalf of the member of the Dieppe Public Library Commission. As you know, the members are appointed by the Municipal Council. And briefly, her role is to act as a defender for the councillors and to represent the interests of the community as a whole for present citizens and generation to come. Allow me to take this opportunity to thank the excellent work that the employees are doing, the commitment towards our co-citizens, and the Commission wishes to thank them for their professionalism and their devotion. For the presentation, I would like to say that the installation that exists in the app, especially the library, are the fruit of visionaries. The library is very busy, and this is why we are making this request. We are asking you a letter of support that will accompany our application to the Higher Education Department to fill 2 full-time positions. Our supportive argument is that we show the increase of the population of the app, and I think that no one better situated than you to know the statistics. One of the reasons is the movement from the northern part of New-Brunswick to move here by Francophone citizens. The statistics show us there's a lot of young families. That gives us quite an important increase in the students of we have to recognize that the library has similar use in services. This can be translated by an increased frequency of the library by the families. We have given you a sheet with 4 tables, but the timetables are targeted as to the building of the new library that was built in 2007. It increased by 92% between 2004 and 2014. What does this mean? It means our employees will spend much more time in doing jobs, in distributing documents. That's a very happy problem, a good problem. But this has an effect on other services and the programming. To deliver the services of programming to different groups that take advantage of our programs in the library. The item that will make us realize the serious has to do with the equity service. The last 2 tables that you have before you compared the library of the Dieppe to the libraries of similar category. Province uses some criteria as according to the community to categorize and to deliver services. So we have in our network 2 libraries, namely the one in Oromocto and Kinabagueses. For comparison wise, you will see the population are similar in number, but the statistics of the Oromocto library are less than here, and those of Dieppe compare to those of Kinabagueses. By comparing, we notice that the 2 libraries have been in operation for a long time with 2 full-time employees over and above what we have in Dieppe. To conclude, we want to summarize that we want to add 2 full-time employees to make it a total of 5 employees. What this can offer us is to preserve and maybe to improve programming of quality, the possibility of being open 6 days out of 7 instead of 5, and to increase the hours, the open hours 38 to 40. I thank you for your attention and to accept to consider the repercussion that will happen when the minister will grant the additional human resources to the community of Dieppe. Thank you. If you have any questions, thank you very much, Madame Guéret, for questions. Mrs. Dallaire, thank you, Your Worship. I was happy to see the busy traffic and how the books are being used. I have several questions. The first one, can you explain what kind of programs could be implemented if we had additional staff? Something we can't do now, we could do then. I don't think it's the change, but I think it's the quantity and maybe to improve some aspects. Part of the program could be improved. Natalie, librarian, is here, can probably add to my answer. Well, within the present context, we have a restriction of reducing certain programs that focus on the early childhood between September and June. We don't have the support in the summer. We have student projects, and we offer 2 or 3 programs during the summer months. For the rest of the year, we're more limited. We went since 2010, 2011. We offer between September and December, I would say 16 to 20 hours to the family of the community. Now we can only offer 8. If we are able to recruit volunteer, maybe we can offer more. but as far as the full-time staff is concerned, we are unable to offer a lot of programs for school-age students between September and December because of the workload. So the kind of programs that we want to offer for the young people so that they will contact the library, we focus mainly the early childhood. There's not a lot of variety in the program because we lack times and resources. Thank you for the explanation. If I may, I have two other questions. Go ahead. The next questions, maybe you know, maybe you don't know. Does the provincial government have criteria of evaluation as to the traffic when we add, when we decrease? So is it simply by request and they deal with each request individually? Their criteria. So in the library, are assigned a category of library. Some calculations are made to assess the need of staff. When the library opened here in 2007, following the request from the city of Dieppe and other communities, we added 2 part-time employees in Dieppe because there was an increase in the population. We are opening a new library. We also added some staff to the Shediac and Review library at the same time. But it has to do also with the request from communities. But there's no automatic process that will open the process. I can give you more explanation at what time they are reassessed. Your Worship, if you look the people, I'm in favor of sending a support letter. Thank you. Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I would like to congratulate you, Mr. Gueret, for the volunteer work that you and your team are doing for the public library. And I believe that in your request, we have to mention that the rate of literacy is higher among the Francophone than Anglophone. Maybe we're quite educated in Dieppe. Maybe the situation is less, but we have to continue our effort. And as such, I think that we should mention it to the minister in the letter. And also, like Councillor Dalar, I would support a letter of support to help you to obtain the 2 additional employees, especially with the figures you've shown us, compare with the other 2 towns offering similar service to us. Thank you. I can confirm that the statistics are from very valid resources. It's public. We are members of the AWK regions, which Albert was born in Kent. So pursuant to the Public Library Act, everything is in order, and we are encouraged to make this request also. The support of regional office, they are aware of our situation, and how can I say it? They are aware of the fact that the library is in line to be the next one to receive additional staff. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Godet. Thank you, Mrs. President, for having presented the needs that the staff mentioned to the Commission, and for presenting well the aspiration that the members of the Commission wanted to see. That is just, of course, there is a technical service to be had, but there is also the programming, which is to be more and more actively offered. Thank you for being there. For those who are supporting you tonight, thank you. Councillor Vivo, thank you, Your Worship. I notice in your chart that Quispamsis, sorry, Kennebecasis and Oromocto make reference to neighboring communities. Over and above Dieppe, do you serve other regions such as the Greater Lake Burn, among others? Do you have members of your library that are not necessarily from the city of Dieppe? Absolutely. The Users Public Library like to move? Maybe Nathalie can better answer that. Well, it's particular to Moncton and Dieppe. A lot of users go to Moncton and Dieppe at the same time. A lot of people are from Memramcook, Skiduk, even Shediac, who work in Dieppe or work in Moncton, and they also become users of the Dieppe library because we're bigger than they are. People make a choice, and as librarians, we want to make sure that the service we offer are comparable to elsewhere. We can't offer the same service everywhere, but of course, we serve people from the surrounding communities. We recognize them, and they also appreciate very much the Dieppe library. We want to be able to offer them more service. The reason I raise this issue is that you should be considered or mentioned in your request because you serve more than a population of 25,000 people. It should be mentioned. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much. So I will ask that we invite the public Dieppe to come to the not only but for the request, but also an opportunity for the members because if they have any question as to the operation, anything else to add. Thank you very much for the graphic or the chart. I think it clarifies and it goes without saying. Thank you. I can assure you that the staff will contact Nathalie to have more detail if we need more details to support your request to have additional staff. Thank you for your presentation. We appreciate your work as volunteer. It is much appreciated. Thank you very much. This is the end of today's presentation. I want to thank everyone for your active participation as always, and I wish you a good evening.